planning on, preaching soon because, I think it's maybe once a year that I do a sermon. And when I was made aware that it was, time, my quota was up, I was like, I had a plan. I'm going to do a message on worship. It's easy. I've done it before, but I felt like, this will be good. I already know what to say. No pressure. And last week was really busy and a lot of stuff came up. And so Thursday morning, I wake up and I'm spending time with the Lord and I'm like, okay, I need to do my sermon today. It's Thursday. And he was like, hey, you're preaching a sermon on faith. And I was like, okay. So he kind of pivoted me, which was good because then it challenged me to put that faith into practice. So I went into the Bible and I went into the dictionary because I love dictionary definitions and looked up what the word faith means. And the faith I'm talking about isn't like we say faith as like a religion. I'm talking about faith, and the definition of that is the complete trust or confidence in someone or something. So this last month or 6 weeks of life has been really crazy and it's felt really busy, and I know Tommy shared a lot about that. But I really felt like, man, my faith has been tested this last couple months, and I know a lot of people feel the same way. And it was kind of this moment for me while I was going through the sermon where I'm like, man, like, is my faith really what I say it is in God, or is it just kind of something that I say because I've said it for so many years? And it was great because this week God really had to challenge me on that. And so we've been doing our community Bible study on Thursday nights. It's been so much fun for me because Tommy gets real deep and studies the history behind it, and I love school, so I'm totally nerding out on it. And we're going through the book of Daniel right now. And I was raised in a Christian school. I've read these stories many, many times over many years, and I'm still learning things. And so we're going through this part of the book where we're talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do you guys know this story? Yes. Shadrach and Benny, if you've seen VeggieTales. If you haven't, you guys, it's a great rendition. You should watch it. It's all about the bunny. But anyway, so in this story, you see the king. He creates this big golden statue. He's asking them to, he's going to play music, and when the music sounds, everybody is called to bow down and worship this statue. And these three men were Jewish exiles. They were good friends with Daniel. They are holding strong to their faith, and they say, we're not going to do it. So the king goes to them, he gives them, one more chance, kind of puts them on the spot and says, hey, you guys need to do this. And so this is what they say. So we'll find them here in Daniel chapter 3, 16 through 19. And before I read this, I want you to know that given this king's history, they knew he wasn't joking around. Like, throwing him into a furnace was not something that they thought was beyond him. It might seem crazy now, but back then he was nuts. They knew he would do it. And this is what they said. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. And so our story moves forward. You guys know how it ends. He throws them in the furnace. He heats it up real hot. And then he sees them walking around, pulls them out, and God is made exalted in that. But what I want to focus on, even though that part is amazing, like they didn't burn, it was amazing. But what I want to focus on is their faith in this moment. Most of the time in the Bible, when we're reading through different people that we really look at as heroes of the faith, they were not amazing, strong kings. It's like most of the heroes in the Bible were just ordinary people with extraordinary faith. And so we see people in the Bible like Mary, who was chosen to give birth to Jesus, just a young girl. We see David, the youngest of 12 brothers, chosen to be king because God has a plan and a purpose, and they had faith. And so in this moment, they say, the God we serve is able to deliver us from your hand. And they say it with truth, and they know that God is going to do it. They don't say, well, maybe the God's going to deliver us, or we hope that God's going to deliver us. They say, our God will deliver us with confidence. And then beyond that, they say, but even if he doesn't, meaning that they have faith not only that God can do it, but that they have such faith in his plan that even if he doesn't accomplish what they were asking in that moment or hoping in that moment or knew he could do, that they had faith that his plan was bigger and that his plan was perfect. Amen. And when you look at faith, faith goes hand in hand with trust. Faith and trust go together because it means if we trust God's plan, then we know that, yeah, he can do it. Because you can believe that he could do miracles without trusting that his plan is good. And you have to remember that these two things go together, even if he doesn't. And we look in the Bible at Jeremiah 29:11, which I think pretty much everybody knows because it's like the coffee cup verse. But if you don't know this, I kind of wanted to know why this verse was in there, what the context behind it is. So Jeremiah at this time is in Jerusalem still. He is a prophet and speaks for the Lord. And this is a letter that he wrote to the Jewish exiles who were in Babylon. These same people we're talking about during this time with Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So he's writing to them as they have been taken from their land. If you don't know, they were in their land got ransacked, and they took them into Babylon and gave them this whole new lifestyle, and they were not in their home. And he's writing to them, and it's a message from the Lord. And in this moment, these people were struggling because they'd been there for years. They didn't know what the plan was. And I don't know what I would do if that ever happened, if I was taken from my homeland into this new place and forced out of the area I wanted to be and into these new customs and these new traditions. But Jeremiah's writing to them, and he's telling them, hold strong, don't listen to false prophets, and basically saying to them, continue to live your lives. Don't give up hope. Get married, have children, because Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So right after this, God tells them, seek me, and in your struggles, just remember, I have a plan. And it was this moment of comfort for them that even though they were in a really rough situation, God knew and had a plan for them, a plan to bring them home, to bring them through, and he was going to see it through. And in our lives, sometimes it's so hard for us to remember that God has a plan. But yet, the God back then is the same God today. He is today, he is yesterday, he is tomorrow. So that God who had a plan for them has a plan for us. And another story of faith that we see in the Bible is in Matthew. And I love that Alma came up and shared this morning because that she saw the verse that said, I have a poem that matches that. And I'm like, yes, please. And this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. So we're talking about in Matthew all these miracles that Jesus is performing. He's doing all these amazing things. And then in chapter 9, verse 20, we see this scene happen. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if only I can touch his cloak, I will be healed. Jesus turned and saw her and said, take heart, your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. So we see this woman who'd been struggling, and 12 years is a long time. And back then in Jewish customs, if you were struggling with a health thing like that, you were exiled. You weren't allowed to do everything that everyone else was allowed to do because it was considered unclean. So this woman, not only dealing with a physical ailment, she's also dealing with probably loneliness, probably feeling outcast, probably feeling unsupported. And yet, in this moment, she doesn't even think, I need to go talk to Jesus. She just goes, her faith was so strong, she said, if I just could touch his cloak, I would be healed. And in that moment, he says, your faith has made you well. And over again throughout the Bible, we see these stories where Jesus says, it's your faith that made you well, your faith that has healed you. And what would it look like for us to have that kind of faith where we're like, yes, God can do it. And then more than that, if we can have that faith like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and just believe God can do it, but even if he doesn't, I trust him. But even if he doesn't, I will hold strong. And so I looked up the opposite of faith because I wanted the term, and the opposite of faith is mistrust. The opposite of faith is having doubt. The opposite of faith is having anxiety or unbelief. And there's areas in our life that are easier to have faith, and there's areas in our life that are a struggle to have faith. And we're all human. It's not a new thing to struggle with faith. Everybody has been there, and it doesn't mean God's mad at you when you struggle or disappointed. But what it means is those areas where you feel like you're struggling in your faith, that's an area that you can work on. So, how do we grow our faith? I would love to have that. I want to continue to grow my faith so that I know Lord can do it, and even if he doesn't, I trust him. So the first way that we grow our faith is through trials. And I hate to say that because it's like that's one of the hardest things. But over and over again, we see that through trials, God is walking us into the purpose and the plan that he has for our lives. Even when it's difficult, even when we're in the middle of the fire and it's just like you feel overwhelmed, that's the moment where you get to grow your faith. That's the moment where God's going to bring that faith to completion. James 1, 2 through 3. By the way, James is my absolute favorite book of the Bible. If you ever need like a reset of your faith or you're just like, I don't know what to read, go read James. It's so, so good. And this verse says in verse 1, 2 through 3, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So we have to consider it joy when we face trials, because there is a purpose in it. And you may feel under that pressure and you may feel that, but joy, it's not talking about joy like you need to be happy. Like, yeah, I'm so happy all these horrible things are happening. But what it is, that joy of the Lord that Tommy talked about last week, that joy that is present even through the trials. And so a couple weeks ago, Tommy and I are talking because we're just like, man, we feel like life is just kicking us right now, and we're tired and we're worn down, and we just want to be over this and into a section of life where it's better, right? Because, life is a roller coaster. And we got to talking about Damascus steel. And if you don't know about it, I just did a whole bunch of research about it, so now I feel like an expert. But Damascus steel is known for being super strong, and it's kind of like this legendary form of blade making. And even to now they say it's not replicated as well as it was back then. But when you're making Damascus steel, there's a very specific way to make it. So they have these intricate and beautiful designs on it, but it's also super strong. It says it could cut through a barrel or cut hair as it falls. But their technique is so precise that they have to heat it to just the right amount of heat in order to make it strong and sturdy and beautiful. So if they don't heat it long enough and they pulled it off of the, I don't know how they make it, I didn't read that part, but if they don't keep it under the heat long enough and they pull it, what happens is there's places in the blade that are brittle, and so when they go to use it for its intended purpose, it would break, or it wouldn't be strong enough, or if they pull it at the wrong time and cool it the wrong way, it wouldn't have these beautiful designs. And that's exactly what James is telling us here, right? That the Lord was telling us, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature, complete, and not lacking in anything. Because we know God has a purpose for each and every one of us, and we know that sometimes we have to go through trials to get stronger. And we might want to be done with it. We might be like, Lord, get me out of the fire. I'm ready for it to be cool. I'm ready to be done and beautiful. And yet, if he pulls us too soon, it would be a disservice to us. It would be a disservice to the purpose he put on our life, because we would not be strong enough or ready, and we wouldn't be able to do and walk into the purposes he has set before us.
Yeah. Amen.
And what's cool is that he's molding us to be strong and beautiful, so let's go, ladies. Strong and beautiful. So the next way that we can grow our faith is to get to know our God. If you want to grow in confidence in his plan, learn more about who he is. Like anything in life, if you want to do something, you need to believe in it. If you want to sell a product, you have to believe in it. If you want to start using something, you have to believe it's going to work and believe in the plan. Get to know your God. If you're struggling in an area of your life, or there's something like I'm struggling with anger, I'm struggling with anxiety, look up what God has to say about it. Look up what God has to say about fear. Usually he says something like, don't fear. That's a typical man answer. No. No, but he does. And that's the thing. When you get to know what he says about those things, just like Rod said, I loved what you said this morning. Don't tell God about your problems. Tell your problems about God. I love that, because he has very specific things he says about all these things that we struggle with. And once we get to know them, then we realign our heart so that we line up with what he says and what he thinks and what he feels about every area of our life. And as we read, we get to read these stories about how he shows up. And that's why I've loved reading through Daniel, even though it's like stories I've heard. It's just these reminders over and over again. And we were talking about Daniel and the lion's den. That was our last chapter we went through. And it was talking about how Daniel prayed intentionally at his window 3 times a day. And that doesn't mean he didn't pray throughout the day, but I mean 3 times a day he set aside a time, morning, noon, and night, to go before the Father on his knees and pray. And we have to get into the habit of praying, spending time with our Father, because that's how we get to know him. We read our word and we pray. And those 2 things are very huge weapons and will grow our faith. And the third way that we can grow our faith is by surrounding ourselves with believers. Having fellowship is so important, and that is a big part of why we call our church Rock of Life Fellowship and not Rock of Life Church, because it's not a building, and we get so caught up in this is a building, but what this is a fellowship. We are a body of believers, and God intended it that we can come together and support each other. Hebrews 10:24 through 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So we not only get spurred along when we have fellowship, but we also have the ability to help others. So it's 2-part. One, our faith grows, but also we are able to minister to other people. And let me tell you, Testimony Sunday, the last one we had, I had tons of people come up to me like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Because you know what? People's testimony, your individual testimony is powerful. And that it matters more than just words. So what you have and what struggles you've gone through, and maybe even what you're going through right now, it's important that you come together with other people and be able to, 1, encourage them or let them encourage you. Last week, Tommy talked about having an accountability group and how he and his friends were text each other every day when they read the Bible to help encourage each other. And I was sitting there with 2 of my friends, and I was like, we should do that. Because if they have a group, I want a group. So we started a group text, and I can tell you what, before last week, I probably read my Bible 1, maybe 2 times a week, just regularly. I was out of the habit. And I've read my Bible every single day since last Sunday, because I have people encouraging me, because I have people reminding me. And that is why it's so important to have people around you. And by the way, if you don't have an accountability group and you want one, come talk to me. You can be a part of our group. Or, if you want to, find a couple of your friends that you trust and just say, hey, let's do this together. Because I'm telling you, it is so encouraging. And the other way, you guys, we have Bible studies. Okay, so our church, because I do announcements every week, we have Bible studies like every day. There is not really a day you could go without it. And so what I want to encourage you is get into Bible study. I hadn't gone to Bible study regularly until we started ours, and I'll tell you what, I look forward to it every week. Not just for the social part of it, although I like socializing, but also because I'm learning, and it's exciting, and I'm learning more about the Lord. So get plugged in. There's Bible studies, and if you feel like you need to start one, start a Bible study. Come talk to us, okay? So there's lots of ways to grow your faith, but as your faith grows, it will start to breed peace in your life. As your faith grows, it's going to breed confidence in your life. It's going to breed assuredness in life, even when the world is rocky, because as your faith grows, you start to realize that God is bigger than all those things, and you don't have to worry about it. And then you get to walk through life in a freedom, and then you get to walk through life so confident that you could be standing in front of a fiery furnace and you say, I know my God can do it, and even if he doesn't, it's going to be okay. I'm not going to fall. Glory to him. And as humans, sometimes I think we like to put God in a box because we, want to understand everything about about him, and it's hard to realize, God is bigger than this. And his plans are bigger than our plans. And when we don't trust him, when we don't have faith, we all of a sudden get mad at him. We're like, God, why didn't you do this? God, why did you do that? And we feel like because his plan didn't go the way we wanted, that we have the right to get angry at him. But the truth is that that's on us, because our faith needs to be so strong that we don't care what happens to us. This life, you guys, is temporary. And as believers, this is the closest we're ever going to get to hell. So yeah, sometimes it's hard. Yeah, sometimes it's rough and you're like, what is happening? But hold strong, hold firm. This life is nothing compared to the eternity that he has waiting for us. So yeah, it's hard. Now, if necessary, right now, we're going to go through trials. But take heart, because he's overcome the world, and we get to spend eternity with him in a perfect world with no tears and no pain. So God is molding us into something with a purpose. And the cool thing is that God is not held to the constructs of this world and the physical science of this world, right? God is bigger than that. And it says in Isaiah 40:12, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and hills in a balance. God is so much more than we can understand. God is so much bigger and infinite than we understand. He's not even in the same dimension. In the Bible, it says that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, omnipresent, everywhere, and omniscient, all-knowing. We can't even fathom that. I can't even remember, where I put my phone, usually. I have to use my little thing to find it. I stopped wearing my watch for a week, and I couldn't find my phone 10 times a day. And Tommy's like, call it. I'm like, it's on silent. Anyway. We don't get it. We don't get how big God is. Even if we try, even if we studied our whole life to understand God, we would never get there, and that is a good thing, because that means we serve a God who is worth serving. We serve a God who, he's more powerful than me. I know nothing. He knows everything, and that's where you put your trust, that he knows everything, that he has a plan, that he has a purpose. And then, hand in hand with that trust and that faith is surrender. Surrender your plans. Surrender your feelings on something and put it down and say, Lord, it's nothing. I need to pick up what you think, what you feel. And you do that by getting to know your God, by getting in your word. And then I know he can deliver me. And even if he doesn't, my faith will not be shaken. Jesus talks about having faith like a child. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked in children's ministry. I do it, and they are the most hilarious thing ever. And their faith, man, unhindered. You should hear them talk about what's in heaven. I mean, I didn't read that there was unicorns in the Bible and the grass was candy, but they believe that. And they believe it wholeheartedly. And my son Daniel, he the other day was telling me, like, hey mom, like, can you pray to God for me? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I was called Tommy, I was gonna call Tommy, and he's like, no, just you and me. Like, what do you want prayer for? He's like, can you please pray that my 2 favorite cartoon characters can come to life? I'm like, what? I thought it was gonna be something, you know him, he's serious. He's like, yeah, can you pray for that? I just, God can do it, and I just was hoping you'd ask him because you hear from him better than I do. And I'm like, okay, buddy. And then I'd tell him, like, well, they're cartoon characters, and Tommy explained it to him better. But that faith like a child, he knows facts. God is almighty. God can do anything, and God created everything. And if God could do all that, why couldn't he bring a cartoon character to life, right? Like, I mean, it's silly, but at the same time, it's confident. It's confident to go to the Lord, like, these people, it's confident to say, like, throw us in the furnace, okay? Like, you can't touch us. And that's a confidence that I want. That's a confidence and a faith that I'm striving for, because I want to be so confident it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what trials come up. It doesn't matter, because my God can, and even if he doesn't, it's okay. And God still does crazy stuff, God still does miracles all the time. And, we have started so much to rely on ourselves and the experts around us that we forget the ultimate expert. We talked about at Bible study why more miracles happen in other countries than not America. And we were like, well, I mean, what's your first response when you get upset? What's your first response when you get sick? Do you go to the Father first? Or you're like, I'm going to try to solve it, We got to go to him first, because he knows it all, right? And miracles still happen. And you guys, we need to get to the point that even if they don't, we still trust his plan. So if you're feeling like your faith has been tested lately, or you're tired of trying to make your life better, you're tired of trying to make relationships better, or whatever you're trying to do to make it work, that's the moment we go to God and we say, grow my faith, Lord. I need you. Because we're not going to be able to do it on our own. It's exhausting out there. It's tiring. I'm tired. Everyone I talk to lately is tired. And that's because we're doing it on our own. We can't do this on our own. It is only him, and that's where we put our faith. So let's let perseverance finish its work so that we can be mature and complete and not lacking in anything. We're going to grow our faith by getting to know our God, and we're going to trust that he can grow our faith. And we can have confidence, and with that confidence, we can have freedom. And with that freedom, we can live life with his purpose in mind.